You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and obviously I'm starting with the NBA. Usually, when I start with the NBA, I go chronologically through yesterday's games. So the game that happened first, I'll talk about first. The game that happened second, I'll talk about second. Not going to do that here. The biggest story yesterday, by far, is the epic choke job that the Clippers pulled off. So much for them as NBA champions. I mean, my God. I mean, I'll tell you. After watching Kawhi Leonard's and Paul George's performances yesterday, I felt like such an idiot for picking this team to win the NBA title. The thing about Kawhi is he's a winner, right? Shuts down LeBron in an NBA Finals and then leads an otherwise good but not great Raptors team to an NBA Finals. Two-time Finals MVP, Kawhi Leonard. You can always trust him in the playoffs, right? And playoff P, Paul George, right? The two of them combined to shoot 10 for 38 from the field yesterday. They shot 4 for 18 from beyond the arc. Neither one of them scored more than 14 points. Hell, Montrezl Harrell, a guy who did not have a good Game 5 and did not have a good Game 7, comes out and leads the Clippers in scoring with 20 off the bench in 25 minutes. Give him credit, he showed up. Why didn't the Stars? I mean, the Clippers mortgaged their future to pull off the George trade. Part of that was thinking that the two of them, George and Kawhi, combining forces would make LA a Clippers town. And it's kind of funny, this hit me yesterday. Kawhi and George, very easily, could have been Pacers. Because Kawhi Leonard was actually picked with an Indiana Pacers pick. Then the Pacers traded him to the Spurs for George Hill. If the Pacers had just kept that pick, history could have been a lot different. But you pull off that big trade. You convince Kawhi to sign with you. And part of that involves him bringing George with him. So you pull off the monster trade. For Kawhi and George to perform the way that they did yesterday is absolutely inexcusable. I mean, they were the two constants in this series. George underachieved in the Dallas series. Against the Nuggets, he got his head screwed on straight. He had the bad game in Game 4, but other than that, he was dropping 20 every time out. And Kawhi Leonard, the clutch king, the born winner, only puts up 14. Watching that game, I couldn't believe what I was watching. The Clippers as a team shot 38% from the field and 26% from beyond the arc. And bear in mind, this is in a Game 7. You were up 3-1 in this series. Everyone was salivating at the thought of an All-LA Western Conference Finals. The NBA should have moved the bubble from Orlando to the Staples Center. And you respond to going up 3-1 by choking the lead away to an inferior team. All due respect to the Nuggets. Alright? Backs against the wall. There's no team in the NBA that I want to go up against less than the Nuggets. Back-to-back series that they've come back from 3-1 deficits. But they're not as good as the Clippers. They do not have that star power. If we play this series 100 times, the Clippers win more than they lose. I mean, yeah, the Nuggets can come back against the Jazz. That was an evenly matched series. Against the Clippers, no chance. I think I gave them a game. I think I said Clippers in 5. And the Nuggets weren't even great in this game. They turned the ball over 20 times. They only shot 35% from beyond the arc. The Nuggets were good. Again, I don't want to take anything away from them. What they've done in this bubble is really, really impressive, and Mike Malone deserves a massive contract extension. But if you look at those rosters side by side, how do the Nuggets stack up? At center, they're great. Point guard, they're great. Everything else, power forward, small forward, shooting guard, bench, forget about it. Clippers all day. Yet somehow, the Clippers choked. All the Warriors 3-1 jokes, they're now going to be Clippers 3-1 jokes. But forget about blowing a 3-1 series lead. Let's look at how they did it. Game 5, the Clippers are up by 16 at one point. They're up by 12 at the half. They lose by 6. Game 6, the Clippers are up by 19. They're up by 16 at the half. They get their doors blown off in the second half. The Nuggets won that game by 13. Yesterday, Game 7, do or die. The Clippers have a 12-point lead at one point, and they blow it. We talk about no lead being safe. No lead is safe against the Nuggets, and no lead is safe when the Clippers have it. This is, without question, one of the biggest choke jobs in NBA history. And you can make the argument in sports history. Again, you go and look at the talent that the Clippers have. This all-star squad that they put together. And they absolutely lay an egg. The Clippers starting 5 combined for only 48 points in this game. Jamal Murray by himself had 40. He nearly matched the entire Clippers starters by himself. And that's not even bringing up the fantastic performance by Jokic. This guy had a triple-double through 3 quarters, something that no one's ever done in a Game 7. 16 points, 22 rebounds, and 13 assists. Jeremy Grant had a good game. Gary Harris had a good game. They both dropped 14. I really don't want to take anything away from what the Nuggets did. It's really impressive that they came back from 3-1 down in back-to-back series. The only team in NBA history to ever come back from 2 3-1 series deficits. Forget back-to-back. Just 2 3-1 series deficits. They're going to be a tough out for the Lakers. There's no question. Nikola Jokic matches up pretty well with Anthony Davis. And Jamal Murray can torch any one of the Lakers guards. Unless you count LeBron as a Lakers guard. But I'm talking about guys like KCP, Danny Green, Rajon Rondo, etc. But this really is more about the Clippers choking than it is the Nuggets coming back. I'm sorry, it just is. I don't want to rain on Denver's parade. They have every right to be thrilled right now. But this is more about 2 of the 15 or 20 best players in the NBA combining forces before the season. And then they no-show in a Game 7 and blow a 3-1 series lead. And now the Clippers really have to take a long, hard look in the mirror. What changes can they make? They can't pull off another big trade. They don't have any firsts. They put all their eggs in the Paul George basket. Realistically, the only thing they can do is fire Doc Rivers. And that's the right decision. Because you cannot be the head coach of this incredibly talented team and then watch them blow a 3-1 series lead. Rivers isn't a bad coach, but look, he hasn't won anything in over a decade. He has been coasting since then. He is the only coach in NBA history to blow multiple 3-1 series leads. Will he land on his feet very quickly? The answer is yes. But having said that, it's pretty clear that he's not the right guy to get you over the hump. This isn't even the first 3-1 series lead he's blown as Clippers head coach. In 2015, he blew a 3-1 series lead with the Lob City Clippers against the Rockets. And this was when the Rockets' second best player was Dwight Howard. And Trevor Ariza was their third best player. The Clippers had Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan, J.J. Redick, Jamal Crawford coming off the bench. The Clippers need to move on from Rivers. It's just that simple. Their window to win is now. See, here's the thing. There are a lot of NBA teams that underachieved this year that are built to win right now. The rosters they have, if they don't win right now, they're in trouble. The Nets are in that boat. The Bucks are in that boat. The Rockets are in that boat. The Sixers are in that boat. And the Clippers are in that boat. Each GM needs to look at the other teams that I just mentioned and say, you know what? We need to go all in here. We need to move all our chips to the center of the table and make a huge run for this thing. I'm not talking about the Clippers. The Clippers can't do much outside of firing Doc Rivers. They just don't have the assets for it. unless they're going to get really crazy and pull off some crazy trades, like player-for-player trades, they don't have the firsts to land a guy like Bradley Beal or Jrue Holiday or someone like that, Chris Middleton, whoever. But I can promise you that the GMs of every team that I just mentioned are looking far and wide for that missing piece. The Nets need a third star. It's not Karis LeVert. I don't care what anyone says. The Bucks need to reorganize their whole roster. Just get 3-and-D guys. That's it. The 76ers need to figure out how they can make all their pieces work. Darvin Ham or Mike D'Antoni would make a ton of sense. The Rockets need to learn how to play defense. And they have a guy who can't win on their roster in Russell Westbrook. You can put the Clippers there too. They need to find a coach who can get them over the hump. I think that we're going to be in for a very hectic offseason. One that's going to feature a lot of trades, a lot of big signings, guys combining forces to try to push their new team over the hump. And we still have some big coaching jobs out there to fill. The Rockets and Sixers, namely. Hopefully you can put the Clippers there sooner rather than later. I like Doc Rivers, but it can't be him. Going forward, there's no way he can lead this team. It's kind of incredible when you stop and think about it. Everyone's talking about Nuggets Clippers. Yet no one is talking about the epic overtime game that happened yesterday. Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo were like this. Hey, look at us. Look at what we did. Jimmy Butler hit the big shot at the end of the game to give the Heat the lead. And then Bam with one of the most ferocious blocks you'll ever see. That's right up there with the LeBron block from a few years ago. I mean, you remember when I said this is going to be a classic series? So far, so good, Jacob. Both teams played great. The Heat had 5 players score in the double digits. Tyler Hero, off the bench, nearly had a triple-double. He played 40 minutes, dropped 12, 11, and 9. Duncan Robinson got the start, but pretty quickly it became apparent that Hero was the better option. And I like that. When you have a microwave shooter like Duncan Robinson, if you see early on that he's just not feeling it, take him out. I understand in the regular season you may not do that. You want to try to get him going and don't mess up his confidence for the rest of the year, but in the playoffs, you don't do that. Great job by Spoelstra. Also a great job to get Jay Crowder going. This was Crowder's best game of the playoffs. He dropped 22. Who saw that coming? I mean, I don't want to take anything away from what the Celtics did because they did play well. Jason Tatum had a double-double. Marcus Smart went off. But you remember when I said guard play was going to be huge for the Celtics? Kemba Walker, another bad shooting night. 1 for 9 from beyond the arc. That's why the Celtics lost If he hits one more three, this game may not even go into overtime. So the Celtics win. But I'll tell you, I haven't spent enough time talking about Bam Adebayo's block. If you haven't seen that clip, please search it out. YouTube, Twitter, I don't care where you find it. His hand bends basically all the way back, and he's able to stuff Jason Tatum at the rim. Tatum blew by Jimmy Butler. Great job by him. Bam comes over with the help, and it's a fantastic block. He got all ball. How many times do you see help defenders like that commit a foul? Or they just miss the block entirely? Bam Adebayo this year has inserted himself into the conversation of best young players in the NBA. His vision, his defense, he can score, he can rebound. If you were building an NBA team from scratch, and you didn't want to win right now, you wanted to try to win in the future, you could do a lot worse than having Bam Adebayo as your center. It's funny. Right before that block happened, the Islanders game went into a commercial break. So I flipped on HeatCeltics just to see what was happening. I knew the game had gone into overtime, but then I saw 12 seconds left. Celtics about to inbound. I said to my dad, "Dad, I'm watching these final 12 seconds." And my dad isn't a big basketball fan, but even he appreciated that block. I mean, just to give you a sense of how much my dad doesn't like basketball, last year, he spent more time watching the Scripps Howard National Spelling Bee than he did the NBA Finals. Because right after I finished watching the NBA Finals, I turned on ESPN just to see what was on, and it was the Spelling Bee. And I'll tell you, my dad had spent the whole night buried in his computer. He stopped what he was doing to watch the Spelling Bee. So if he appreciates a basketball play, you know it's an iconic play. I don't care what happens from here on out in this series. The Celtics could win every game by 50. 100 years from now, we're still going to be looking at Adebayo's block as one of the best defensive plays in NBA history. Right up there with LeBron. I'll even put it up there with Havlicek stealing the ball. That's how impactful it was. Moving on now to the Islanders. They did force a Game 6, even though they tried really hard not to. I mean, this was a frustrating game to watch, because the Islanders didn't deserve to win this game. The Lightning just deserved it less. The Islanders really didn't win this game. The Lightning lost it. And that scares me. Because you can make the argument that in Game 3, the Lightning lost it also with the asinine turnover. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from the Islanders, but they only had 16 shots in regulation. They only had 24 in the whole game. The game went into double overtime, for God's sake. I mean, they finally scored on the power play. Thank God. Jim Hiller finally got his head out of his ass. And then the big penalty kill on the Beauvillier high stick. He'd be right up there with Zach Whitecloud and Alex Tuck. But the Islanders killed it. Special teams is what won this game for the Islanders. And Varlamov, too, standing on his head, making 36 saves. The Islanders played well enough to win, but if you were watching that game and you're a real hockey fan, I know that there were people watching yesterday that don't know good hockey. You could tell that the Lightning weren't attacking as much. They weren't being as forceful. They were settling for a lot of rebounds. They wanted low shots on the net to generate opportunities. Even the one goal they scored wasn't any great play or anything. No Islander picked up Victor Hedman as he was entering the zone. Blake Coleman sees him. I mean, how can you miss him? The Lightning like to get their defensemen involved. That was something that they were saying on the broadcast. The Lightning like to get their defense involved. The Islanders should do the same, and they were 100% right. But no one picked up Hedman. He walked into the slot and ripped a howitzer past Varlamov. Is that really a great job by the Lightning? Or is that just the Islanders having a momentary lapse in judgment for not picking up Hedman? I understand that's something that Cooper likes to do. Get his defense involved, walk into the shot, and rip it. But I don't see that as some great coaching. I see that as a bad job by the Islanders for not picking up Hedman entering the zone. The Islanders had long periods in this game where they didn't even get a shot on net. The highest shots on goal total that they had in a period in this game was 6. The Lightning outshot them just in regulation. If the Lightning didn't get a single shot on goal in overtime or double overtime, they still would have outshot the Islanders. 25-24. Also, you could kind of tell that the Lightning weren't playing with any great sense of urgency. And I think you can trace that to Braden Point not playing in this game. I don't know if he's going to play tomorrow. I hope he doesn't. Because the 2 games the Islanders have won in this series, Point has been scratched. But I'm pretty sure he's going to play. I don't see him missing another game. Because the one thing you don't want is to have this series go to a Game 7 if you're the Lightning. Once it goes to a Game 7, anything can happen. The Islanders could do the unthinkable. You just saw the Nuggets come back from 3-1 down in back-to-back series. There's no reason to think that it can't happen in hockey. So I expect Point to play tomorrow. If he does, I think the Lightning are going to win. If he doesn't, the Islanders have a great shot at forcing a Game 7. And just a couple other things before I move on. The mixing up of the lines that Barry Trotz did. Look, I admire the creativity. I don't even mind the 11 forwards, 7 defensemen. Because Boychuk played great. Blocked a lot of shots. And even if you want to go 12 forward, 6 defensemen tomorrow, Boychuk has earned a spot. Scratch Mayfield or Taves. Preferably Taves. But I think it's safe to say that those lineup changes really didn't work. At the end of the day, the Islanders only got 24 shots. Alright? It's not like Clutterbuck, Barzell, and Lee combined for a goal. It was on the power play, Pulock, Leddy, and Barzell. And then the 2-on-1 breakaway at the end, Eberle and Lee, who technically shouldn't have even been out on the ice together. because Eberle had been moved down to play on the third line. So look, I really admire the creativity. I honestly do. It made sense to put 3 of the 4 forward lines in a blender and see what came out. But it really didn't work. They only scored 2 goals. They only had 24 shots. I think Trotz is going to try some different combinations. I'd be surprised if he went back to the normal lines. I think you'll see some other crazy combinations. Also, going back to my point of the Islanders not winning this, the Lightning lost it. You take a look at the 2-on-1, that was just Kevin Shattenkirk fanning on a shot. It wasn't anything the Islanders did. Shattenkirk had every opportunity to put the puck on net, and he just whiffed on it. I mean, I give Lee and Eberle credit for converting on it. Great pass by Lee to set up the one-timer for Eberle. The Islanders did convert on that opportunity, but look, they had some other opportunities when they didn't. Matthew Barzal in all alone in overtime on Vasilevsky. And Vasilevsky somehow stones him. Another time, Vasilevsky with his toe deflects the puck as it's going across the crease. Vasilevsky and Hedman, the only 2 good Lightning players from yesterday. Also, I had 4 intermissions to think about this. Obviously, I'm going to do an Islanders off-season preview. The only question is when. If they lose tomorrow, I'll aim for Friday night, but you may end up getting it Saturday. But I'm going to aim for Friday night. And if they lose on Saturday, I'll aim for Monday morning. But it may end up being that Tuesday. Obviously, if they win, no off-season preview. I hope they win. I hope I don't have to do an off-season preview for the Islanders for another couple weeks. There is some other hockey news to talk about, and the first bit of news is a mammoth extension. The Wild signed Jonas Brodin to a 7-year extension worth $42 million. That's $6 million a year. Brodin is a good defenseman. I wouldn't call him great. He plays a very sound defensive game. And his offensive game is good. He's a good two-way defenseman. But you can't give someone who's never had more than 28 points in a season, which he had just this year, $6 million a year. I don't care how good he is defensively. This is a gargantuan overpay. And you combine that with the fact that the Wild have Jared Spurgeon and Ryan Suter signed to big contracts. The Wild are in cap hell. They don't need to spend this much on defense. I'm not saying defense isn't important, but there have to be cheaper options. You have to be able to negotiate a guy like Brodin down. Maybe not Suter. And Spurgeon wasn't too bad. It wasn't great. But it was a hell of a lot better than this. $6 million a year? I don't even mind the 7 years. Brodin is young. $6 million a year for Jonas Brodin. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. And it broke as I was editing yesterday's show. There are a lot of better defensemen in the NHL than Jonas Brodin. They all had to be doing backflips when they saw this. The Wild may have just reset the market for top 4 defensemen at $6 million a year. Which means the top 2 defensemen have to get, $7 million a year? $8 million a year? This is a terrible overpay. I like Brodin, but there's no way on this planet that he's worth this contract. And now to make room for him, according to Michael Russo of The Athletic, the Wild are shopping Matthew Dumba. Look, I understand that he's on a big contract. He's also on a $6 million a year contract. I mean, that's also an overpay, but it's not as bad. I personally think Dumba's better than Brodin. He's much better offensively. Defensively, Brodin is better, but Dumba's not a liability. So this tells you that Bill Guerin is prioritizing defense over offense from his defensemen. I don't mind that. But I kind of like having two-way defensemen. I like having guys who can rip it from the point. Look, I don't mind that the Wild are shopping Dumba. He is overpaid a little bit. But the reason that you're trying to trade him is because you overpaid another defenseman. You replaced a bad contract with an absolutely abysmal contract. How does that make any sense? Dumba should fetch a second or maybe third rounder for the Wild, but they'd have been better off just letting Brodin walk or go to Seattle than doing this. This is really dumb. No pun intended. The other bit of hockey news concerns the Arizona Coyotes in their quest to find a new GM. According to Craig Morgan of AZ Coyotes Insider and verified by Elliot Friedman, the Coyotes have made an offer to Bill Armstrong to take over as GM. Armstrong was a really physical AHL player, never afraid to drop the gloves. Big defenseman, a guy who you didn't want to mess around with. Then after he retired, he got into coaching. If memory serves, he actually worked with Peter Laviolette in the AHL. But while Laviolette stayed in coaching, Armstrong moved into the front office. He started as a scout and then worked his way up to become an assistant GM for the St. Louis Blues. So if you're making the connection, is there a relation between Bill Armstrong and Doug Armstrong, the Blues GM? That's why he got the job? No, there's no relation. So I think this can work, assuming Armstrong gets the job. The Coyotes went really outside the box when they hired John Chayka, a really young guy who was heavily into analytics. It failed miserably. So the Coyotes are going the opposite direction by hiring an old school former player. It makes perfect sense. I think Armstrong will do a really good job, assuming he gets the job. There is one bit of NFL news to talk about. Allen Robinson is extremely unhappy with the Chicago Bears for not extending him. Now, according to his agent, he hasn't requested a trade, but Robinson is upset. And it may get to the point where he wants out. Allen Robinson is one of the more underrated receivers in the NFL. He helped Blake Bortles a lot. And he's doing the best he can with Trubisky. He has a knack for making mediocre quarterbacks look really, really good. So let's put our thinking caps on for a second. What team has a glaring hole at wide receiver and has a quarterback that has had moments where he's looked mediocre? Moments where he's looked really good, but also moments where he's looked mediocre. Yeah, I'm talking about the Jets. Someone brought this up on Twitter. I think it was Joe Caporoso. It may have been Rich Cimini, but I think it was Caporoso. He brought up the fact that the Browns traded Braylon Edwards to the Jets mid-season. And that really helped Mark Sanchez. And it did. I liked Edwards a lot. I could very easily see Joe Douglas being aggressive and trying to make a trade for Robinson. Look at the Jets wide receiver core. Denzel Mims may be out for the first half of the season. So it's Perryman, Hogan, Crowder, and Berrios. Wouldn't you rather see Allen Robinson in there than Braxton Berrios? Wouldn't you rather see him out there in two wide receiver sets than Chris Hogan? What would you need to give up for Robinson? A 3rd round pick? I'll do it. I actually want to try to win this year. Alright, the notion that the Jets should just wait until next year, I don't know who thought that was a good idea besides Joe Douglas. But that is ridiculous to me. Douglas needs to be on the phone with Ryan Pace now, trying to trade for this guy. Hell, I'll even put Howie Roseman in there also. The Eagles need wide receiver help too. So Douglas may end up bidding against his old boss. If it gets to the point where Robinson really wants out and the Bears crash and burn because Trubisky goes back to being Trubisky, Allen Robinson better become a Jet before the trade deadline passes. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that Mike Anderson's limitations were limitless.